Good evening, everyone, and welcome again. Studying of the Tanya. Last week we began studying chapter 34. I just want a very quick reminder of what we studied. In last week's class, we discovered the Alter Rebbe is asking, we have many reasons to rejoice, to be happy. The problem is it does not penetrate and change our attitude. So therefore, the Rebbe says that in order for someone to be able to become a vessel for joy, to live a happy life, it is through bitul. Bitul is self-nullification, to nullify one before God. Why is it important? I'm giving different dimension this week that we didn't discuss last week, but it's on the same theme. Because when you are humble before God, you allow yourself to connect to God. Once we connect to God, God is all about joy. Everywhere in the Torah, every time God gives us a holiday, is v'samachta b'chagecha, to celebrate, to rejoice. Every time God gives us a mitzvah, King David says it's a cause for joy. Every time we have an opportunity to serve God, we become joyous. In other words, I cannot stress it enough that life equals joy. Without joy, you can't call it a life, number one. Number two, if one wants to rejoice, they need to realize that the evil inclinations fight or war against the human is by pulling you away from joy, giving you reasons to be mad, to be unhappy. And what happened then, we stay away from God because God will not rest among people who are not happy. Last week, somebody mentioned, I think Linda mentioned that Yaakov, even though our forefathers were chariot to God, but Yaakov did not marry to have God to speak to him for 22 years. Why? Because he mourned after the loss of his son. It was a very serious and justified conduct. After all, he resembled the look of his mother, whom he loved so much, and he worked for 14 years like a slave because he was lied to and cheated. And then he was the one that he studied with. He was very close. Yosef, the Gemara says, is a replication of Yaakov. And when that child get lost, it really, there was nothing that can make up for it. Yet the Torah says you can be justified, but God wasn't there until when it says that Vatchi Ruach Yaakov Aviyam, the life of Jacob came back alive when he found that Yosef is alive. And that's when immediately thereafter God comes to him and says, don't worry to go down to Egypt. So we need to understand that life is joy. The evil inclination will fight through sadness and depression and melancholy. And therefore, if I want to be able to fight it, it is the true humility. That's one. Why? All the forefathers, Moshe's greatest trait that came closest to God is their humility. It's not their intelligence, it's not their wealth, it's not their ability to pray, it is their humility. That's point one. Point number two, and we studied it last week, the Rebbe is saying that if we were to be humble, then people cannot hurt us. If we are humble, then whatever happens to us is made by God, and God is good, and therefore there is a good purpose for it. It hurts, we don't understand, it's all true, but it should not cause us to be separated from God. The Rabbi goes on to say that that's why today, if you wanted to be able to connect to God through humility, it is through the study of halacha. That's the second point the Rabbi is making. Why? The Gemara says that when the temple stood in Jerusalem, that was God's dwelling. Now the temple is destroyed. Where can you find God? When you study the 4 cubits figuratively of halacha is where God is found. Why? One explanation is because in halacha, it doesn't make sense, but you must do it, meaning you have to humble yourself. So God says this is not kosher, even though it's very healthy and it tastes very good, but if it's not kosher, God don't want it. So when we study halacha for the sake of following the halacha, we humble ourselves before God, and therefore the connection is a very strong connection. That's number two. Number three, the rabbi goes on to say that there is another way of understanding a connection to God. And I shared with you, so last week I showered you with stories, and I did not explain the meaning of each story. I don't think so. I don't want to repeat the stories, because for that you can go back to the lesson, the last week's lesson. But there is one story I want to point out the purpose of a story. There was a man who, after he got married, his name is, I had shared with you two stories. One of them is Rabbi Yehuda Eisel from Homil, and he went to the second Lubavitch Rebbe. He got married. He went to the Rebbe to ask advice after he got married what to do. And as there was a large crowd, everybody went by fast. And he asked Rebbe, what's my blessing in the future after I got married? The Rebbe says, you should be a businessman. And he was kind of shocked. He thought he didn't hear himself. He didn't hear well, or the Rebbe didn't pay attention to who is speaking to him, because he was a chassid, he was a teacher, he wanted to be a rabbi in yeshiva. So he goes back to his town and he tells his friends, and the friend says to him, probably the Rebbe didn't hear you well, or he didn't understand who you are. Why don't you go back? And usually with a Rebbe, the way it works is when the Rebbe says something, it's holy. You don't ask, you don't argue, you don't say, oh, the Rebbe didn't understand well, because then that's not a Rebbe. But in this case, it says, Rebbe, based on advice of my friends, which is appropriate, I'm asking again. I was hoping to become a teacher in the Cheder or in yeshiva, because I enjoy studying of Torah. And I was told by the Rebbe to go and start a business. And the Rebbe turned to him and he says, what do you think your purpose in life? Is it to study Torah all day? This is not your purpose in life. Your purpose in life is to earn a living and dedicate a little bit of time, despite the fact that you're very tired and you don't have much time and you're stealing time from sleeping and resting to study Torah. That's how you bond with God. And he went on to give him an example. He says the merchants of Shkalov. Shkalov was a town in Poland. They spend 9 months of the year in Leipzig, and only 3 months a year are they home in Shkalov, where they sell what they found in Leipzig. Are they called the merchants of Shkalov or Leipzig? Obviously, they're called from Shkalov because that's where they live. But it's not fair, because 9 months of the year, 3/4, they are not home. They are in Leipzig. They should be called merchants of Leipzig. But the reason they are called merchants of Shkalov is because they are in Leipzig only because for the purpose of making a living and be able to support their families in Shkalov. So they are named that way, not because they spend majority of the time in that town, but because the purpose of spending the year was for the little bit of time they will be in their hometown, making a living, selling good merchandise. Same is about you, he says. In order for you to bond with God and study Torah all day, you go to business, you earn a living in honesty, you support your family, and you are able to share and show people that a God-fearing person is able to serve God in the universe. And then the little time that you have, you dedicate to God. Once you do that, you become a Torah scholar, because the little bit of time that this is the purpose of your life as you feel, and this is the reason you go to work, and this is the reason you have a family to serve God, now you become a Torah scholar. In other words, what the rabbi is going to go and say, and I don't remember if we studied it, but we will in a moment, that when someone gives tzedakah, they don't have to give all their money. In fact, someone who wants to give tzedakah and be charitable and give all their assets, It's forbidden by Jewish law. In Jewish law, the maximum we can give is how much? 20%. 10 is obligatory. 10% is obligatory. The maximum is 20%. The Gemara says, the Rabbi says, do not give more than a fifth. 10% you are obligated. What does that achieve? It brings a blessing to the remaining 80%. So if someone gives the maximum, we call him a very charitable person that all his earning and all his income is holy, even though he uses 80%. But the 20% of charity or 15% or 10% that he gives covers over, speaks up for the rest, and makes everything else included in a holy earning. Says the Rebbe, when I take 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, and I study Torah, or I learn to humble myself and bond with God, it will impact the rest of the day. God will bless and bond with me for the rest of the day. Even though at that time I don't study halacha, even though at the time I don't pray, I don't study, but just like tzedakah will clean up for all the income, for the remainder of my bank account of my income, so is whenever we serve God. And that's what the Rabbi is saying. So again, the first part the Rabbi is saying is humility. Then the Rabbi speaks about halacha within the study of Torah, which brings humility to a person. And then the Rabbi goes on to use the example of tzedakah. And the reason the Rabbi is using tzedakah, as the Rabbi will explain in a moment, is because God is a kind God. He's extremely kind. That's why he created the universe. That's why he sustains us for no benefit whatsoever. He's not getting back anything from us. Because God is kind, whenever I am kind, I emulate God. When we emulate God, God wants to connect with us because that's the kind of a creature that God wants to be part of. So far, so good? Let's go. I am going to read on the bottom of page 457. Thereby his heart will rejoice. He should be glad and offer joyous thanks for his fortune in meriting to be a host to the Almighty through his study of Torah, which causes him to be a sanctuary for God twice each day, according to the extent of his available time and according to the capacity which God has granted him. In other words, you don't need to be engaged in studying Torah all day long to become a Torah scholar, to be called by God someone who studied Torah. Even if I do it only twice a day, in the morning and in the evening, according to my ability, God will make it as if we study Torah all day. If God grants him a greater abundance of time for Torah study, then he whose hands are pure will increase his effort. That is, he should resolve that as more time becomes available to him, he will devote into Torah study. Moreover, God reckons a good intention as an actual deed. Therefore, I just want to show the following, and I'm a living example. When I raised my kids, I had no time, and I thought I was busy. And today I'm much busier. Yet one time my mentor said to me, "Do you study Rambam?" At the time I didn't. I stopped studying Rambam because my wife, we had babies. My wife was up all night, and by day I would give her a little respite. I would take care of the babies, and I would come into the office for 45 minutes, do whatever I need, and stay home with the kids. And then in the afternoon, come back for another 45 minutes, and then stay with the kids. So my wife can rest during the day, and then at night she would stay up. I cannot stay up at night. So one day he says to me, "Do you study Rambam? 3 chapters." I said, "No, I stopped." He says to me, "Why?" I said, "Because I just don't find the time. I have the kids all day. Literally all day I had the kids." He says to me, "It's not good because if the Rebbe asks to study, you can do it. But I know you will not accept that. You will right away outright reject. So why don't you make sure to study 1 or 2 paragraphs a day, just 2 paragraphs. It takes 2 minutes. And today you have it at the phone, on the phone. At the time there was no iPhone. There was but I had one of those smartphones that had digital text, and I had Rambam there. So he said, pick up every day, pick up the Rambam and study two paragraphs, reading 7 lines. That's it. At first, I thought it has no purpose because I can't say I studied the Rambam because you study Rambam, meaning a chapter, chapter. But I started doing it sporadically. I would do it 3 times a week about. Then came Shabbat. I said, on Shabbat, I do have time. I rest many hours, but I can rest to half an hour or less. And so on Shabbat, I started. Then Sunday, I said to myself, Sunday, there is no mail. There is no banks to worry. Don't have to check the mail. Don't have to pay bills. So on Sunday, slowly, before you know it, within, I believe, 6 months, I went back to studying three chapters a day. Over the years, I added more studying Gemara, studying Mishnah. And not only I enjoy it, but I look back and I say to myself, how is it possible that today, more or less, I can sit and study for an hour and a half in the morning, where 10 years ago, if you told me that I would study an hour in the morning, they would say to me, you're crazy, it's just impossible. And this is what the Rebbe is saying here. God wants us to make the first step. Once we make the first step, God will arrange our day to be a much, much different day where time for study is always available. So I was told by a rabbi, by the Rosh Kollel, Rabbi Heller, who was, after I got married, I went to Kollel. Married men go to Kollel. Let's say yeshiva for married men. So the Rosh Kollel, the head of the Kollel, said that if you study Rambam every day, or he spoke about Torah, I think, but he spoke, at the time he spoke about Rambam, you will get God's blessings for the entire day. And this is what the rabbi is talking about here. God does not ask from us to study Torah all day. God says to us, as long as you do a little bit in the morning and a little bit in the evening, as long as you realize this is as much as you can, then it is counted as if you studied the entire day Torah. Why is it important? It doesn't matter about the reward, more reward, less reward. That's not the issue. The issue is to be happy, to rejoice with God, to be able to live through the life's challenges. There are difficulties that we all go through the day, more or less, some more, some less, but everybody goes through trials and tribulations of life. If we study Torah, what it does is it gives us an anchor. So even if I do it a little bit, over time we see that suddenly we make more time for it, and it impacts the entire day. The previous Rebbe went to a businessman, turned to the Rebbe and says that he's so busy. He was a very wealthy man. He was very rich, that he has no time to study Torah. And the previous Rebbe says to him that when you read about the obligation to study Torah, we call it kvi'at itim la Torah. Kvi'ah means to apportioned, given certain time. Itim is plural, timing, or certain timing. La Torah, to study Torah. He says, it doesn't say kvi'at et la Torah. Et means timing. But when you say itim, it's plural. He says because the obligation is to study Torah in 2 types of timing. In a situation when you have no timing, and in the situation when you do have the timing. In other words, of course, someone who has the time can study more, someone who has less time, and within the day or the week, there are days you can do more or less. But to say that I am excused because I have no time, it is the Torah mandates from us to study Torah when we have time and when we have no time. That's why it's in plural. Let's continue. Therefore, on page 458 on the bottom. Therefore, even while his time for Torah study is limited to a small part of the day and night, he is regarded as if he had studied the entire day, since he would have devoted all this time to Torah study had it been available. By virtue of his good intention, he thus is, in a sense, an abode for godliness, not only during the time actually spent in Torah study, but also throughout the day. The Torah gives us an opportunity to be Torah scholar and study Torah all day long. only by doing so in the morning as much as we can. And the rest of the day, we need to do whatever it takes. That will be counted as if we study Torah during that time as well. Even during the remainder of the day, when he is engaged in business, he will be an abode for God by giving charity out of the proceeds of his labor. And as I said here, the rabbi is using another example to bond with God. Charity is one of God's attributes which we are enjoined to emulate, as our sages say, as he is compassionate, so must you be. And as it is written in Tikkunei Zohar, kindness is the right arm of God, so to speak, and therefore human kindness constitutes an abode for the divine attributes of kindness. So if I go to visit the sick, and I go and assist someone, I go to see people and cheer them up, I'm acting just like God. God is kind and I'm kind. By doing so, even if I do it once a week, even if I do it twice a week, if I do as much as I can, by doing so, I am connecting to God for the rest of the day. And God guarantees once God is with me, it will humble the person and therefore bring joy. Even though one distributes as charity no more than 1/5 of his earnings, the maximum requirement for charity, how then is he an abode for godliness while he is engaged in earning the other 4/5? Yet the fifth elevates with it all the other four parts to God, so that they too becomes an abode for him. So I earned $100 and I gave a maximum of $20. The remainder, the other $80 are making an abode for God, no matter what I do for it. I go on a cruise, I buy myself a birthday cake, I am celebrating a party, I'm buying myself a new computer, it doesn't matter. It becomes godly.
Get 20, or what about 10? You have to get the 20 for this to happen?
No, you don't have to give 20, but you do need to give 10.
But 10 doesn't work for the other 90?
What? Yes. What's the difference between 10 and 20?
10.
You're right. Thank you. This is the way I see it. There is a whole different discussion about giving tzedakah to atone for sin. That's not the discussion here. What the rabbi, the way I understand it, it depends on our ability. And I'm going to use my personal example because this way I don't offend anybody. There were times that we were, I wouldn't get a salary being here as a rabbi. I would just get whatever barely to make. We would pay late fees, so many late fees on power, on electricity and water and telephone and car payments. Always late fees, late fees, late fees. Even the credit card. So if somebody were to say to me, give 20%, I would laugh at him because it's not the right thing. It's against the Torah. Pay your bills, right? Pay your obligations first. So therefore, the 10% is for everyone, regardless. But if someone is able to, let's say, has a nice savings and a cushion for many, many years to come, and he wants to be blessed to benefit from those funds, then the Torah obligation, not Torah obligation, but the Torah suggests that he should give more. However, the maximum is 20%. I hope I made myself clear. In a well-known statement, our sages have declared that the mitzvah of charity is equivalent to offering all these sacrifices. In other words, anytime the Torah is saying the mitzvah without naming a particular mitzvah, it refers to tzedakah. The sages tell us that tzedakah is equal to all the sacrifices. The Rebbe, from a Kabbalah point of view, wants to explain, and let me show it you beforehand so you can see it in the text. The Rebbe says, just like in sacrifices, you take one animal, You slaughter it, you place the animal and the blood on the altar, and it atones and purifies the entire species of that animal. In other words, you have a representative of that species. One animal is a representative of all the species. So is the same as they would bring flour. The flour would be to bless all the crop that will grow for the year. That's the purpose. Therefore, the same is tzedakah. When you give a handful of tzedakah, meaning 10%, it is not just for that 10%, but for the other remaining 90%. And here is the way the rabbi is saying that. Now, in the case of sacrifices, all living creatures were elevated to God through the offering of one animal. According to Kabbalah, the purpose of sacrifices is to elevate the universe, and each sacrifice had different parts of the universe to be elevated. All plants through the meal offering, which consisted of merely 1/10 of measure of fine meal mixed with oil, and so on. It's a handful of fine flour with a little few drops of oil, and that would elevate all the plants, the category of plants to God. Similarly, all of one's earning are elevated when he gives 1/5 to charity. Apart from this, as is explained below, all that one has eaten and drunk and generally enjoyed for his bodily health from the other 4/5 of his earning is elevated towards God during his Torah study and prayer. Thus, even the time spent on earning those profits, which he does not distribute in charity, also becomes on a board for godliness through Torah study and prayer. So again, the rabbi is saying that we have another reason to rejoice and to humble ourselves when we take a small part of the day to study Torah, when we take a small part of our earning to give to charity. What we did is it makes up for everything else. So if I take, let's say 15% and I give to tzedakah, the other remaining 85, I go on a cruise, or I go and I splurge myself with a nice car and a nice outfit, nice clothing, whatever it might be. All that is elevated and become part of God. So God does not asking everything. God is asking everything, but everything is becoming godly when I take one section and make it to God. Remember the story I told you about the king visiting the town, and he told the rich man, give me one room, but I want that room to be mine completely without strings attached. I don't want the palace. I want one room. God is asking for one room in our life. God is asking only 10% of our earning. God is asking for study of Torah at the beginning of the day, and that changes the entire day, that affects the entire day. Now the rabbi is going to summarize everything we studied until now. And here is what the rabbi is going to say. The following is actually, as I said, not directly related to what we said till now, but a summary from chapter, I believe, 26. What do you see?
30.
Well, just a minute. Chapter 26, 27, 28, we talked about Simcha, joy. Why should we rejoice? Chapter 29 and 30, 31, we study about bitterness, how to take depression and sadness and convert it into bitterness, and that sometimes you got to break the piece of wood. Remember, you got to, what do you call it, small pieces? Splinters. That's when the fire, godly fire, will penetrate, when you take a big chunk of wood and you split it into small pieces. In chapter 33 and 34, the Rebbe came back to Simcha, to the idea of joy from a different angle. Chapter 32, the Rabbi is talking about Ahavat Israel, how we are all one family. From now on, the Rabbi 35 and on, the Rabbi is going to talk about the purpose of our life. What's the purpose of our life? How we each find what we are here. But let's conclude this chapter. I'm going to read from the text of Rabbi Weinberg that put this book together. Before I read the Rebbe's text, from the end of Chabad 30th up to this point, the Alter Rebbe discussed various forms of joy which one ought to strive to attain when saddened over his spiritual shortcomings. The joy of one's soul and its being released from exile within one's body and animal soul. The joy of being close to God through awareness of His unity. The joy occasioned by contemplating God's joy in the crushing of the Sitra Achra, and so on. The rabbi was talking about 4 reasons to be happy from a spiritual point of view. Chapter 26, 27, 28, the rabbi was talking about joy from the physical aspects. Here is from the connection and what it achieves to God. Number 1, says the Rebbe, when you are happy, you are redeeming your soul. You bring in your soul close to God, because without joy, the soul is lost at sea. There is no connection to God. Number 2, the joy should bring joy. We should be joyous because we are close to God. Whenever I'm happy, as we'll say l'chaim soon and be happy, we are coming close to God. That's why Hasidim say l'chaim, to forget about their pain and suffering so they can be happy, because that's how they come closer to God. Number 3, you are hosting God. I think we spoke about God is coming to you and ask to stay overnight. And you are so lucky to be able to host God. And finally, and also the rabbi is talking about, we spoke about bitterness as well. The rabbi is going to say that we spoke in chapter 29 and 30 and 31. The rabbi is talking about bitterness, and he's knowing full well what he's taking stock of his condition and how far is he from God. Remember, we spoke about doing it in a given time and not allowing it to be done during the day. Also, realizing that the body is always pulling, the animal soul is first and take hold and controls the body much stronger than a godly soul. And the idea that we have to humble ourselves before every human being, no matter how far and how low the person is, he is greater than me. I think if you remember what we studied. Here it is. The Alter Rebbe now goes on to state that all these forms of joy do not conflict with the bitter remorse and sadness that one experiences over one's spiritual failings. For although joy and sadness are of opposites, they can nonetheless coexist with it when each has its own distinct cause. What the rabbi is going to say is a Hasidic conduct that's done all the time, and that is, you can be very bitter. By the way, I train myself to live that. You can be very bitter about missed opportunity, about losing, but at the same time have great, great joy, knowing that you are connected with God, knowing it's God's will. In other words, you can have both. It's both opposites. It's not. It seems like a dichotomy. It seems that like it's a conflict that you have two souls. And how is it split personality? But it's not. It is simply the trait of the human, as the Torah tells us. The Rebbe is going to quote from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in the Zohar, who says, in my heart, on the right side, I'm very joyous. On the left side, I am very saddened. You can have both. In other words, you can be sad on the fact that, why didn't I do more? Why do not feel God? Why my desire is to do sin? At the same time, be very joyous to say, but 1 second, God is here. God is in my house. God is happy when I'm happy. Let me be happy. You can combine them both. I want to show you a story. The name is Avraham Zcharia, Yaakov Zcharia from Skalik. There was, during the communist ruling in Russia, they forbade for any Jewish ceremonial or study of Torah. And in Russia, in White Russia, there was a lot of youngsters, young Jewish boys and girls who were getting married, but they were not getting married with a rabbi in a kosher way. because it's forbidden. If they're going to get caught, if they're students, they'll be thrown out of college. If they have work, they will be left homeless with no work, or worse, they will be put in jail. This Yaakov Zcharia Skalik from Skalik took it upon himself to make young couples get married in the Jewish way. So how does he do? When every night he knew this was a town, Skalik had a lot of Jewish people. So it was a large Jewish population. So he knew the ballrooms, the Michael Zanis, the Aura, the places. He would come to visit. I was just going by and I heard the music, so he would stop by. The first thing he would go is find the Bobbe, the grandmother. Hi, so happy for you to see. But he tried talking her into that it should be done in the Jewish way. And the grandmother, she's very well connected to Judaism. Of course, she wanted it. She said it's not allowed. So he said, don't worry. While he was socializing, he would give her a little l'chaim. He would take out a flask of vodka, pour himself, pour her, so let's say l'chaim, celebrate the occasion. Once they're melting, slowly but surely, the grandma would call the bride and say to her, listen, you don't want to lose the chain. So, and the girl would say, okay, let me call the boy. The boy would say whatever the wife says, of course. And then he would take them into a side room, take two witnesses, write the ketubah, he knew the ketubah by heart, and marry them. Now they're married. And you would run from ballroom to make couples be married in the Jewish way. The problem is, what's the problem? Ah.
They find out.
The problem is he would come home and he would fall on his bed, he would be drunk. Completely drunk. So one day his wife, as kind as chassid she was, she couldn't bear it anymore. She went to the rabbi of the big town next to, that rabbi was in charge of that town as well, Reb Shmuel Levitin. He later became a famous rabbi in Brooklyn. She says to him, my husband, every night, she understands that he's doing a very holy work. She said, he comes home, he's jumping and you can't talk to him. He's in upper universes and he's drunk. But then he sits down and he takes a Hasidic discourse called Derech Chaim from the second Rebbe. And in there, the Rebbe is talking about the physical limitations of our body. And he sits there, he can't even read, but he starts crying and crying and crying. I don't understand my husband. Is it Simchas Torah by him or it's Yom Kippur by him? You can't have them both. So the rabbi turned to her and he says, it is a very good question. A normal human being either is by Yom Kippur or he passed Yom Kippur and he reached Simchat Torah. Your husband is so holy that he can accommodate Simchat Torah and Yom Kippur in the same heart at the same time. So he has Simchat Torah and Yom Kippur at the same time. So he can enjoy life, he can be very happy, extremely to a level of getting drunk. And at the same time, he still have Yom Kippur, the fear of heaven, knowing his limitations and crying about it. And this is what the rabbi is going to talk about. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai have done so. An example, again, I can share with my I don't want to talk too much about myself. Less than a year ago, I lost my father. My father was extremely unwell, but he never complained, and he was always happy. He cherished life. He was holding on to life like crazy. When he died, the pain is something I don't remember ever experienced that. But at the same time, I realized that he is now in such a good place that it filled up my heart with great joy. So at the same time that I was going through a mourning period, and even though I've passed 50, you can say, well, we know the nature of life. And I knew for years, every time I would visit Israel and visit my father, I didn't know if it's the last time I see him. But yet, and then I was lucky enough to be for more than 2 weeks on his bedside every single day for about 5-6 hours. So it was a gift that was given me. But the pain of actually realizing I'll never be able to see him is unbearable. But at the same time, the joy that realizing that he had fulfilled a purpose in life. And therefore, for him, it's the right thing. For him, it's very good. And that brought me a lot of joy. Also knowing that I was lucky to have such a father. So you can have both at the same time. Again, this is something that Hasidim practice a lot. They live through it. Here is what in the words of the Rebbe. I'm reading on top of page 461. All the specific types of joy enumerated above do not preclude one from being shamed and despised in his own eyes, or from having a broken heart and a humble spirit, even at the very time of his joy. Why, says the Rebbe? For the shame and so on is prompted by one's awareness of the lowliness of his body and animal soul, while his joy is felt on account of his divine soul and the animating spark of godliness clothed within him, as mentioned above in chapter 31. Says the Rebbe, you can realize that you are godly because you serve God and therefore God is with you. At the same time, you can be extremely, extremely upset and depressed about the body that is pulling you away from God and wants you not to connect to God. We find a similar statement in the Zohar. The Zohar, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, one time started speaking to his students about the destruction of the temple. He lived through the second temple and he knew it's coming. And while it was coming, he knew about secrets for the purpose of the destruction of the temple. So they revealed to him deep secrets. So at the same time, they revealed to him that the temple is going to be destroyed. No more sacrifices. God is not going to be in his house. So he said the following. We find a similar statement in the Zohar. He said, weeping is lodged in one side of my heart, and joy is lodged in the other. The fact that they revealed to him new secrets to Torah was great joy. On the other hand, it will be the revelation was because of the destruction of the temple, was something that caused him to be sad. Rabbi Elazar exclaimed these words upon hearing from his father, Rabbi Shimon, an esoteric exposition on the destruction of the temple. On one hand, he now felt even more keenly the enormity of the tragedy. On the other hand, he was filled with joy over the secrets of Torah being revealed to him. We thus see from the Zohar that two opposite emotions stemming from separate causes can exist in one's heart side by side. And therefore, we can live a life of happiness and joy. And there are times for sadness, there are times for bitterness. It does not take away the joy. The joy is still there, and it doesn't pull us down away from that. This concludes this section of joy, bitterness, and how the cause of joy is the spiritual, the connection to God. The cause for bitterness is the distance from God or the body that sets limitations. Next week, chapter 35, we begin a new area, a new discussion where the Rebbe is going to address what we are sent here for. And everyone will be able to discover, in particular, the purpose in life. So we'll conclude here. But as we conclude, we should say L'chaim, because you should pat in the back. We did achieve a great completion of a great section, and we are 2/3 into the book. We have 53 chapters, and we're chapter 35. So we have how many? Less than 20. We have 19 more chapters. So it's 2/3 that we already done. Thank you so much. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Don't go, we gotta say l'chaim.